Chapter 2, Plucking a Bird's Feathers, then Blaming it for Not Flying, the impossible challenge for staff to deal with extreme behavior issues. It's important to understand how few options teachers have for dealing with extreme behaviors. I'll emphasize the absurdity of the average teacher's situation with a fun example. Let's take LeBron James, arguably the world's greatest basketball player, but we'll put him on a football field. LeBron has to stop this running back from scoring a touchdown, but LeBron has to stick with basketball rules, meaning he cannot initiate any physical contact. But the running back can plow right through LeBron at any time using football rules. LeBron James is in an impossible situation. Doesn't matter how good he is. He doesn't have the tools to deal with this. You could add 2 more NBA players and it wouldn't make any difference. Most teachers don't have to imagine this absurdity because we've lived it or watched it. Imagine staff members with arms out, like on defense in basketball, trying to block a screaming student's punches, kicks, biting, and throwing, anything. This can go on forever, as there's only a few staff members with training to do a student hold or restraint, and those with the training are off, putting out other behavior fires in the building. What's more absurd than our lack of options are the ridiculous tools we're supposed to use, such as room clearings. A room clearing is exactly what it sounds like. The whole class clears the room while a student is having a meltdown. Teachers have to wait for a staff member to be in the room with the student, meaning you could wait 20 minutes for someone to have the time to come by. Meanwhile, the meltdown continues. Though a staff member, such as a behavior coach, will talk with the student to try to calm them down, the student realizes pretty quick that they can tear the entire room apart, piece by piece. It's hard to explain in words how much damage is done to not just the room, but the student's reputation and the image of the class and school as a safe space for the rest of the students. When the class can finally come back in the room, they'll almost certainly be the ones to have to clean up the mess. They'll find even their personal belongings ripped apart. Here's a question. Do you think the other students want to play with this student on the playground? Nope. The student is now a social pariah, outcasted from almost any group, which sure enough adds to the next meltdown. And so it continues. Day after day, the meltdowns get worse and the teacher and class go through the day, knowing that at any time this student can be set off, and all they can do is clear the room and let the student get it out of their system until the next meltdown comes. Einstein's definition of insanity applies here, but what's more disturbing is the amount of documentation a teacher goes through before they can even get a minute of scheduled help or an intervention of any kind. Let's consider if a public pool required years of documented proof that a kid cannot swim before the pool was allowed to give the kids swimming lessons or even allow a flotation device. The kid needs help now, not in a year, and it's not doing any good to just keep throwing your kid back in the pool and expecting them to figure it out. So it is with education. To be clear, there's nothing wrong with teachers being required to document behavior, along with strategies we've tried. It is the law, but it's also meant to right a historical wrong, as too many students, particularly students of color, have been misdiagnosed with labels in special education settings that did major damage. Unfortunately, the pendulum has swung so far that the documentation process is a bigger nightmare than it would be to just skip it. The process could take so long that the student might not get services until next year or longer. Time is such a critical factor because if a school can figure out a way to have a paraprofessional work with a student with behavior issues right away, this student can show instant improvement. The key is to get the help right away before behavior issues skyrocket. This is why schools with good funding show less cracks. They deal with the same issues, yes, but that extra bit of funding for help is the difference often between a student learning or not learning how to manage in the class. When or if a student is approved for services, there's still the question of how much help can a 20-minute intervention be for a student having meltdowns all day? More alarming is that students with major behavior issue diagnoses are often crammed in one room together with the other most difficult students in the school. This still happens in so many schools, and it's a recipe for disaster. It's an impossible choice for the parent, too, who knows how bad it's going for their kid in class, but is rightfully so worried it will get much worse in a so-called behavior room. Though there are many schools with success stories on an individual basis, there are so many districts whose schools are in an impossible situation because of the policies enforced by their own district admin. I want to switch gears here and demonstrate how admin policies can sabotage almost any type of leadership in any school. Let's start by giving you a choice between two different bosses or principals. Boss A is more hands-off and will give you more space and creative control. But Boss A is not good with dealing with conflict or working with behaviors. Boss B is hands-on. Everything is by the book and read from the script. But Boss B will stick up for you and will not shy away from conflict. Who would you choose? Probably depends on your job. Many medical and tech people might need everything done by the book, so they prefer Boss A. Teachers will vary a lot too. Some might take Principal A because they need their freedom, while others want a Principal B, who they feel will stand up for them and help them with behavior. What I'd like to do now is show how district policies can make the choice of principals almost meaningless. Let's start with Principal A, who doesn't help as much with behavior, but you've got your freedom, which is vital to a school not being a test score factory. But here's the question: can you actually teach, or will you deal with behaviors all day long? It's another year, you roll the dice, and have a student with meltdowns several times a day. The teacher, Principal A, and supporting staff are spending huge amounts of time and energy calming the student down. All that hands-off freedom goes to one student. So no, you can't teach at all. Same scenario, but with Principal B, who wants academics by the script, but is better with getting help for behavior. What changes? More specifically, can you teach? Unfortunately, no. Consider what's been talked about this chapter. There's no effective options for extreme behaviors that dominate the whole school. Keep in mind that the school has endless behavior issues in all grades, most of which have continued since kindergarten. The sheer number of cases will overrun the principal and staff. It doesn't matter about reading from the script. You're not going to be teaching much anyways. But what about a Principal C? The best principal, years of experience, will fight back against district policies, cares deeply about staff and students, freedom for teachers, but won't do things like room clearings. Sounds great, right? Unfortunately, the same lack of options will overrun the principal's school. But even before that happens, this principal will feel the wrath of district admin. When a superintendent wants a principal gone, they will find a way. The musical chairs method is notorious, where the principal just keeps getting moved to new schools until they eventually quit. This actually happens. What's becoming more common is Principal D, the worst principal. Teacher bashing, test score shaming, you name it. Room clearings won't even happen, as Principal D demands the teacher rebuilds the relationship by apologizing to a student who has been ripping the whole room apart for 20 minutes. Sorry, little Johnny, it was my fault that something didn't go your way. And folks, please believe Principal D drinks the district called Kool-Aid, and please believe Principal D is rewarded for their loyalty. Regardless of principal type, staff and students suffer the same consequences. Parents may be shocked that they haven't heard about all this, but realistically, how would you know, as the district can point to data that suspensions and office referrals are down? So apparently, behavior isn't an issue. But the true evil genius of admin can be seen in how they misuse terms like equity and social justice in order to silence any debate or opposition towards district policy. We'll talk more about this in our next chapter.